All right, friends, welcome. This is, I believe, our first truly joint Just Stage Managers Association and Year of the Stage Manager joint discussion. If you don't know me, I'm Erin Joy Swank. I am the webinars chair for the Stage Managers Association, and you can find me online quite a bit. And this time we are doing things in tandem with Year of the Stage Manager. A little bit of housekeeping. You are currently muted. If you have questions, this is a meeting format rather than a webinar format, so you do need to use the chat feature. If you don't want anybody to see it and be more private, you can send it to me personally so that the others don't have to stare at the chat, and I will field your questions for them. If you happen to be on the phone, which I don't think anybody is, you can do *9 to raise your hand, and I will see that. Otherwise, as you're already doing, please use the chat feature to tell us everybody where you are. So I am coming to you live from my guest room in Denver, Colorado. And after that, I will hand it over to Amanda for intros before I get rid of this slide.
Alrighty, friends. Well, hello. It's so nice to be in the purple Zoom, as I like to call it, as opposed to the orange Zoom today. My name is Amanda Spooner. I am a mostly theatrical stage manager, proud member of Equity. I also serve on council at Actors Equity Association as a stage management seat in the East. I am the vice chair of the Stage Managers Association. I am let's make sure I get my title right, an institutional ambassador for the Parent Artist Advocacy League. And I also very happily teach stage management at Ithaca College. And the show that I was on March 12th, when everything took a little pause, was Sing Street in its Broadway production. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today and the use of Google Slides in our note-taking. But first, I would love for my partner in crime to introduce himself. Noah.
Hey everybody, I'm Noah Silva. I was the assistant stage manager on Sing Street on Broadway on March 12th, the big New York pause. I graduated from Hofstra University with a BFA in stage management. I've done shows such as Fairview, What the Constitution Means to Me, and a bunch of shows at Playwrights Horizons. Yeah.
What a good intro. And as the slide says, it spills the beans a little bit. We have two special guests. We have Flannery, Gregg with us, and Ilan, Eskenazi, but they will be joining us later. So we're going to pretend they're backstage waiting for their big introduction. I guess I should also say that I stage manage mostly in New York City, although I do exclusively new plays and musicals, and I mostly PSM, very rarely ASM anymore, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I'm mostly based in New York City with my work, but often we'll go out of town for out-of-town tryouts for things like in La Jolla or in Boston. I went to undergrad at San Francisco State and got a degree in design and technical theater, which if you ever want me to design anything, don't ask because I can't. And I also went to graduate school for stage management. So we're going to jump in. We do have
You ready for me to turn off the...
Yeah, you can go ahead and turn off the slide. Thanks, Erin. The chat is open. We're, Noah and I should only speak for myself, but Noah, I imagine you're having a similar experience where you are, that we're going to be sort of popping in and out from screen share to video. And I have some notes that I'm following. So Erin Joy is going to help us make sure that we don't miss anything that's a clarifying question in the chat. But at the end, we'll do a Q&A. Love seeing that there's people from the San Francisco Bay Area, just saying, super excited. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Sing Street. So Sing Street is a musical. It is based on the movie Sing Street, which I think came out in what, Noah, 2016? Yep. It's been a while since I've talked about it. So I'm like, 2016, it's a lovely movie. A lot of the people who made Once also made Sing Street. Rebecca Teichman's the director and Sonia Taya is the choreographer. We sometimes talk about it in past tense. It's only because we haven't touched it for 3 months. It is sitting inside the Lyceum waiting for us to return. So a little bit of backstory there is there was a workshop of this musical that had, I think, like a little bit of a workshop in England. Maybe once or twice they had done it in England, with Rebecca directing. And then they were going to do a workshop in Dumbo, which is in New York. It's down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass is what Dumbo stands for. So last August 2019, New York Theater Workshop was producing a workshop of Sing Street. And Matt DiCarlo, who might be on this call, I'm not sure, but we see a lot of Maddie in YSM 2020, which is great. He's also in the leadership of the SMA. He was hired as PSM on that 4-week workshop, and I was the ASM. And then Molly Shea, who I know is on this call, was our production assistant there. That workshop was, a little bit staged, but was mostly about presenting the material, which again, it's a musical. The actors play their own instruments. So there's keyboards and there's guitars, and we've been through a number of small instruments that were very popular in the 80s. There was a keytar at one point, a very naughty keytar that's no longer in the show, but all the music is generated by the cast on stage. And so when we did that workshop in August, we had the ability on the agreement to do some staging, and we did. We experimented with some staging, that some of it's still around in the show now that it's on Broadway. But mostly that was about exploring the text and exploring the music, and then sharing it with people who might be interested in giving it a commercial life beyond its run at New York Theater Workshop. So we did that in August. We knew there was going to be a run in the fall at New York Theater Workshop. I became the PSM of the show when it went to New York Theater Workshop. And that's when Noah Silva joined us as the ASM, and Molly was still with us as well, as I think her title by that point was lead production assistant, but downtown was functioning for all intents and purposes as a second ASM. Am I missing anything in there, Noah? Am I doing well so far? So we had some notes that we had taken in August. Again, we had a lot of video. We're very video reliant, so that we could look at different drafts. It was a lot of experimentation in August. And, just to be super clear, at the end of that 4 weeks, mostly focused on text and music. And when we presented to potential investors and friends of the production, we shared some staging with them, but it was mostly about being at music stands. So there was some notation that we had from August that we would refer to when we went into rehearsal later in October for the actual first production of it. So when we went into that production, I, as the PSM, was taking a lot of blocking notes in my book. Traditionally, with flip sheets in there, I like to put mine on the right side, like to put my script on the left side. We had some new pages. It wasn't horribly busy new page wise, but I definitely was using separate sheets for my blocking and separate sheets for my libretto. I didn't really refer to the score that much. A lot of it is pop music. There's not a lot of reason to really refer to the score, even when I was later, when I was calling it later when we were in production. My Franken script, as I like to call it, had very little score in it. The opening had some in it. But anyway, I was taking traditional sort of handwritten blocking. There, it's a new musical, so there's a lot of experimentation happening in the room. If you're not used to working on new work, it is such a blast, and I love it so much, and I never want to do anything else, and I can't wait to do it again. But it means that there's a lot of different takes that people are going to have on it, right? So we'll do a number, Just Can't Get Enough is in the show, and it's the opening number. I'm like, am I telling secrets? No, because we've already done that. So Just Can't Get Enough was in the production downtown as the opening number. And we did it like 800 different ways. So when I was in my Franken script in the rehearsal room taking blocking with pencil, there was often like 4 blocking pages stacked on top of each other, and I would date them. And sometimes I would timestamp them, because then I could go back and see what we did. On my corresponding script side, I would use numbers and bubbles. I like to do that, but I would start with odd numbers. Then when we did another take, I would go to even numbers. And there were some days where I would go to letters, so I would know what was going on. I don't know about all of you, but for me, just the sheer fact that I'm there and I'm engaged and I can see what's going on, and it wasn't the kind of PSM experience where I was out of the room a lot, which often that happens auditions, and that's another conversation for another day, but I was in the room quite a bit. We really only had the one rehearsal room. So I had a pretty intimate relationship with my notes and could tell you up until we got into tech, like, who was supposed to be where, but I was not tracking instruments to the same level in detail that Noah was with Molly, and was not tracking props to that same level of detail. And Noah, I think that's a good point at which I'm going to hand it over to you and talking about the work that you did on Sing Street downtown in taking notes.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the screen here, and I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to pull up the very first blocking page that I attempted to use on Sing Street downtown. So over here is like basically like the traditional blocking page that I have. I have the odd numbers here, and I have basically like 3 minis here, so I could track the internals of what's happening in a scene. And traditionally, when I'm like as an ASM, like I'm not taking down necessarily like the minutia of the blocking, but if somebody's walking around with an object, a prop, an instrument, I would have written it down here in like where it says blocking, and have like a note section down here, and like the page number here is cut off a little bit in the Word doc version. But that's what I entered Sing Street with. But as as Amanda can attest to, like it was a very fast process, and very quickly I realized that this just wasn't going to cut. This wasn't going to cut it. Like what I had used in the past for other shows wasn't going to work. So I basically was like, okay, what's the information that I need? What do I need for Sing Street for tracking all these instruments, for all of these props? And I came up, share screen. So I came up with basically like this version of like a blocking page that I used. So I have just one big mini like here, and then on the side here, I broke down the stage into R1 through 9 and L1 through 9. And what this basically was it corresponded to every seat, like every seat on the bench, we gave a number. So like stage left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the seat, the guitar hook that corresponded behind the seat. And then also on the back sides of the benches, we had these baskets, and that also corresponded with the seat numbers. So basically, that's how I tracked where everything was on stage in Sing Street. And this was monumentally helpful also because I kind of just ditched the traditional attempts of blocking along with the script. And I basically made a huge packet of just these sheets. I would have a sheet for the top and tail of every scene, and then internal, if it was a long song, I would have the movements and track everything on these sheets. And I found that this worked because if we were going to start from somewhere and I had a page for that, I didn't have to flip all the way through the script as well. I just flipped in my three ring binder of just these, and boom, it was there. And I knew where we were in a song, and I knew what needed to be in each basket, which characters were sitting where, what guitars were on which hook. And I found this to be very helpful. And along with these blocking scripts, Molly had like sheet upon sheet of like guitar tracking. So we had basically guitar sheet, like a guitar tracking sheet in Excel that was just, or I believe it was a Google, whatever the Google Excel program is. But we
Google
used
Sheet.
that in conjunction with Google Sheet,
Yeah.
And that in conjunction with this to basically track all of the small moving pieces within Sing Street, because it was very actor driven with their instruments and their hand props. And yeah.
And Molly's chiming in the chat that I thought it was Google Sheet. Molly says it was Google Doc. Molly would know. What was really great about, oh wow, I was right. Whoa. What was really great about, our team downtown, and our team is still great, but the flow that we found downtown, again, as Noah was saying, as things were like changing really fast, is that there was it was clear who was capturing what information. We had me, and then we had Noah, and we had Molly. And additionally, we had 2 other production assistants, Kate and TJ. They were not both with us the whole time because they had limited hours. They were being paid by the hour. So we had to find a way, although it feels like they were there all the time. When I was thinking about it this morning, I was like, am I imagining that? But no, it just feels like they were there all the time. But they had very specific tasks that they would do. Like Kate was very much in charge of like our video library, which we really relied on because again, things were coming and going super quickly, and that element of music, a lot of it new music, stuff that people are learning on the spot. There might be like a theme that they all learned in, you know, or a piece of music that everyone learned in music rehearsal. But then while we're staging and doing a transition, our music supervisor would say, okay, it's, you know, figure G is what he used to always say. And I'm not doing his accent, but he would always say figure G or whatever. And everybody would know what that was because they had all learned it. And then they would decide who was playing what in the transition based on where they were and who could play and who was moving furniture and stuff. So what we ended up doing is, again, I was taking blocking. Noah, you know, was really just in charge of everything from the proscenium line back, as I like to say, which was great. And could not have done it without Noah. And we couldn't have done it without Molly. Molly was really on top of where the guitars were in such an impressive way that our guitars were labeled by letters, which you're about to see. And we could ask her at any point in any time, you know, where is guitar N? And Molly would know the whole life and the arc of guitar and like where it was going and who needed it and what needed to be on it. Did it need a capo? Did it need picks? Like where are the picks? Like Molly just knew it. And what was really helpful is that as a production assistant in August, when she was with us on the workshop, it was established that she would also be working with the music department. So she had a relationship that was really bridged information between the stage management team and the music department. So when they said figure G, Molly knew exactly what they were talking about and exactly what they were about to launch into, if it was like number 15 figure G or whatever the case was. And also they could go to Molly and say, hey, we're trying to figure out where so-and-so is at this point and where's the guitar, because he's stage left, but where is that guitar right now? And Molly could tell you without it actually physically being set up in the room, which was really great. And we had incredible rehearsal props and scenery in our rehearsal studio, which if anyone who's familiar with spaces in New York City was the gym at Judson. We had walls that were built by New York Theater Workshop that had hooks on them. So like Noah was showing you on the ground plans, there were benches and then there were walls with hooks behind them, a bit like, you know, Planet Hollywood or the Hard Rock Cafe, where you're sitting there and there's just like guitars for days. And again, various instruments, but mostly guitars. There's also a drum kit, which we're going to talk about a little bit too. I think the largest thing that was on stage, right? Noah, would you say the drum kit? Pretty big? Yeah, it was like, yep. So then we did our run downtown just to drop us into a timeline so that you're following, you know, the chronological tale here to some degree. So we did the run downtown. We opened December 19th, I think it was, in 2019. We were gathered for a company meeting in January, something like January 4th or 5th. And we were told that we were going to go to Broadway, which was really exciting. We had plans in place that if we were going to go to Broadway, what the team would look like, you know, what rehearsal, sort of another story for another day, because we actually started rehearsing the Broadway production before the off-Broadway production closed. So there were several days where we had rehearsal on stage for the Broadway production and then had performances at night on that stage for the off-Broadway production. Noah's like, so there was a lot of like note-taking that was happening for new choreography and new ideas while we were still running the show in the evening. Ilan, who we'll see later, and I used to joke all the time that we never had just like a normal week at Sing Street. There was like never downtown at New York Theater Workshop, there was never a week where we were just like running our show. So there's a lot of notation happening, a lot of stuff that we have to track. And it's sort of a mind meld, really, to be doing a variation on something that you're then doing that night in performance. Sort of tricky. But when we were going uptown, we knew that Matt DiCarlo was going to rejoin us as the production stage manager. I was going to be the first ASM. Noah was the second ASM. Molly stayed with us as the lead production assistant, and Kate and TJ came with us as PAs, which it's, again, another webinar for another day, but it's really remarkable. And I just want to underline that and highlight that the entire team stayed intact. The entire stage management team stayed intact, which was cool. So what that meant is that we had a lot of notes. But Noah and I were like, how are we going to, because there's a shift there happening, right? I'm going from taking what I would consider typical PSM notes, where I'm taking, blocking notation. I have some choreo notation. I'm not tracking the finer detail. So we had a conversation about like how we wanted to do that. Eventually on things that you hope are going to run for a long time, you are really thinking about what kind of documentation you're going to make that you can refer to in understudy rehearsals. We had one understudy downtown who you're going to meet, but we uptown all of a sudden had several understudies, and they were covering various tracks. And so you really had to have, and it's a complicated show because of all the instrumentation and in rehearsal because things are changing, and in tech and previews, things would keep changing. So how are we going to build something that we can refer to that's sort of a well, is what I was calling, like a water well, like how can we all drink from the same thing? So I'm going to go into screen share and show you. I was a stage manager on Paula Vogel's play Indecent, which I worked on for a really long time. And similar to Sing Street, I had never been on Broadway before. So when Indecent transferred to Broadway, I was in a similar position where I was not going to be the PSM, but I was going to be the ASM. And so suddenly I was having to think about a show, which was great, but I was having to think about a show in sort of the reverse order. Like if I had those tattoos that said stage left and stage right on my stage left, stage right on my hands, it would be backward, right? Because I had to like flip my brain around. So when we went into Indecent, the many productions of Indecent had utilized Google Slides, which what I'm going to show you is actually PowerPoint, because it was easier to share under these conditions. Noah, will you nod if you can see it? You can see it. So we're not going to spend too much time on this, but this is a PowerPoint file. For anyone who didn't see Indecent, what we're looking at is actually the Amundsen, which is where we did our last production in the United States. Emily McMullen, who's the amazing ASM on the tour, created this. But it was an idea that we were using, off Broadway, and then we used on Broadway. And Indecent, this large, can you see my cursor, Noah? You can. This large rectangle was actually an elevated platform, and this is the audience down here. And up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on are chairs. And in between those chairs, these little rectangles here are suitcases, which Noah calls it trunk tracking, and I love it so much. These are all these little suitcases that many of the props, much like Sing Street, Indecent, same director, not surprising. Indecent was very actor driven as far as how the transitions went. Costume changes happened mostly on stage. All the props were coming out of these suitcases. So it was easier to map it out in this, in Google Slides than in Word, or like trying to use Photoshop, or even using StageRight, which we thought about using StageRight on the tour, but ultimately using things that are Google-based means that more people have opportunity to access them, assuming that they have the technology to get there. There's no payment required of it. And it's a little easier to navigate Google Slides if you have any experience with PowerPoint. So we're not gonna spend, like I said, too much time on this, but there's a key in here so you know who's who. And then you can see that the red lines, across this top line indicate where the lids of the suitcases are. And you can see some, notes that we took that mean something to us, right? And that's the thing about note taking, is that it needs to mean something to the people who are using it. Once you're off and running for archival purposes, you'll probably go in and drop in a lot of detail about, could somebody pick this up and recreate the show off of this information? Because on Indecent, they did. They went to London, and when the big pause started, Indecent was having its London life, and I was not there. But boy, that show is documented, so they were able to pick it up and understand and make sense of it with a new cast, which is remarkable. So you can see here, I'm just flipping through. The bold text at the top is what our shorthand was for what our beats and our scenes were. So this was obviously the salon scene. There's some use of arrows about how things move. The suitcase song had a stack of suitcases in it that the cast would all pull various suitcases out at the same time. It was actually one of the more dangerous things that happened in a show with rain and sand in it, go figure. So this suitcase pull was really important that we knew exactly what direction it was being pulled in. So you can see the notation over there. Anyway, I think everyone gets the general idea. So because we had done that on Indecent, Noah and I talked about it, and we thought that it might be helpful to use Google Slides, which again translates to PowerPoint. You can sort of go back and forth on that. Do you, Noah, want to go into getting us set up for Uptown, and then we'll look at some Google Slides?
Sure, yeah. So when the new team was assembled for Uptown, there was a conversation between like Spooner, myself, Flannery, who you meet later, and eventually Ilan, who was our dance captain, and kind of like we all wanted to make sure we were on the same page, like because downtown, like we had these. I had my like documentation, which was all like on paper and on hand. I mean, I had the deck sheet, but like the charts that I was making and the pictures that I was making on the sheets that I showed earlier, like they were just my handwritten notes, and like once they were in my once the show's in my bones, like I didn't refer to them as much. Like I would show the crew so like they had an idea of the configurations we needed to set up, but it wasn't easily accessible to like a larger team. So and Flannery had used some stage right downtown, but that's that program isn't really conducive to a group of people all using it and also using that simultaneously. So yeah, so when we decided that we would try to use Google Slides, so that we can all be on it at once, we can all see what each other is updating, and this way we are all pouring our knowledge into one location using the same language and updating it like to the minute. Do you want to show what we came up with there?
Yeah. So like Noah was saying, really the driving factor there was to make sure that all of these different departments, because in the stage management team and team choreo, which we would include our dance captain Ilan in that, but also team sound. And in Uptown we rehearsed at New 42. We rehearsed in damn near every studio in New 42. We had to move around a lot because we booked our studio quite late. We've never taped out the same ground plan so many times before in our lives. But we had a local one props person with us. His name was Rich. And, like Noah was saying, we had to be able to communicate that information. And it wasn't about having that well of information in tech. Really, it started, once we were on our feet. And because we'd done the show before, we were on our feet pretty fast. So we started a Google Drive folder called The Brain, and we started referring to our collective selves. Really at that point, it was team stage management plus team choreo, but we started calling ourselves like capital letters, The Brain. And I'm just gonna show you really fast what I mean when I say that, because I think there's probably various skill levels of Google going on here. So let's see. Noah, you can see that, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is Sing Street, Brain, all caps. And you can see there's a video file in here that really Flannery, in conjunction with the stage management team, Flannery, again, being our associate choreographer, was really, really on top of keeping track of all the video files that go in here. And a lot of people were referring to them. We had a lot of international partners on the show in the creative team. And so they were able to access this from England and from Ireland and anywhere else that they were, which was really helpful. It was all in Dropbox. And so it really just stayed in Dropbox. And if you click on these links, they would send you to various Dropbox locations to be able to see what's going on. I can't stress enough how much the vocabulary, being a common vocabulary, is really important, especially for a show that sometimes whole scenes would move or whole sections would move. And so we would have to be able to know what everyone else was talking about. And it's funny because there's some some stuff that changed so much from downtown to uptown, but we like refused to let the vocabulary go. But that's, again, you know, for anybody who was new to the creative team or anyone who's in the room, we just made it really clear. And we actually had a document that had the vocabulary that we were using to refer to different songs and scenes that we shared pretty widely. The brain also has like the smoking plot in it. It has, you know, some different forms of tracking notation. It has our props list, our deck sheet, our change timings, and so on and so forth in it. And instrument tracking, because it is a whole level of complicated ooey gooey goodness. We definitely, for a while, were tracking instruments on their own and separately. And Noah still did. You still maintained a document that had who was playing what when. Do you want to talk about that at all before we dive in?
Yeah, that document was like instrumental to the music team, because like you know, it's a new show, so they were continuously writing new underscore, they were writing new songs, they were taking things away. So Fred, our music director, would need to be like, hey Noah, who plays the baritone guitar in this song? And like we had a separate document where I could just go like look in the little chart we made and be like, boom, it's Gian. Gion's playing that, except that's a lie. I don't think Gian plays the baritone guitar on the show. Sorry about that.
Molly's going to chime in the chat.
But we needed that information. Yeah, actually he doesn't. We needed that information, you know, at our fingertips. And eventually, you know, like Fred, you know, like we invited the music team into the brain so that all of the people were seeing the same information and on the same page. Because again, like we were changing music assignments, and like as we were redoing the show, we kind of committed to the idea that you know, the characters should have specific relationships with their instruments. So then that became very important to keep track of, like, okay, let's make sure that only these people are playing the keyboards, only these people are playing this super cool looking electric guitar, which I believe was M. That was Jakeem's guitar M. That only Jakeem was playing guitar M at all times. And if I looked through the thing, I was like, oh, someone else was playing it in this part. We need to go back and fix that. But yeah, so like it like, even though our slides encompassed everything, it was important that we did have separate documentation, more specific documentation, so that we can find it and communicate it at a drop of a hat.
Yeah, and we eventually, you know, had designers, so we're using it as reference video and not archival recordings, right? Those are two different things. So we had designers that were accessing this stuff as well. So there was a lot of, you know, what our main goal was to try and make it so that we were packing. So, okay, my students on this call are going to be like, good Lord, here she goes. But when you're making paperwork, you're building trucks that are like delivery trucks, right? And you want to think about like, okay, I have to get that truck out on the road and it has to drop off information to point A, B, and C. How am I going to pack that truck? How am I going to know when that truck's just like too full? Do I need a second truck? And to me, that's the kind of efficiency of documentation that you should strive for. It's not always possible. So for us to pretend that Google Slides was going to give the music department all of the information that they needed, that just is, they definitely looked at our Google Slides, but that information that they needed to be accessed in a different way. And that's all about user experience, right? So that's all about like, okay, who are the people that are going to need these things and what do they need it for? And do we pack it all in one truck or do we have separate trucks? And in this case, we had separate trucks. I also just want to say that what's that?
I love the truck metaphor. I've heard that.
Oh, yeah, the truck. Beep, beep. Yes. So love the truck metaphor. But it's, you know, there's in class, I would show you pictures of like overpacked trucks, right? Because we've all like probably nerded out on some deck sheet where like in hindsight, we look at it, or run sheets, I use those interchangeable. It's like you look at it and you're like, oh, that's 80 pages long. And there was like more information there. Right, right. And also just to say, like in my experience, with Local One in the various places that I've worked with them in New York, It's, they, well, sure, they'll like look at your paperwork, they appreciate it, but they, like having stuff in their bones, and they will often develop their own system of looking at like preset photos in their phone. They'll have things that they do for themselves. So I think sometimes stage managers can like really overpack a truck and then get really sort of neurotic about, but it's on page 27, it's section B. And you're like, okay, like we're all just trying to like get caught up about what's going on in the show and stay on top of it. So we did have a deck sheet for the cues, right? So there were things like couches that were being, those were not downtown, uptown, we had couches that were being like sent off into the wings. And there, was like a piano that had somebody riding on top of it, spoiler alert, that would like, come on from the wings. So obviously the crew was going to need some sort of way to cue from that. But Rich, who was our props guy in our rehearsal studio, he was going to stay with us, in the Lyceum, and is staying with us in the Lyceum. And he really, really loved having the ability to look at this stuff in a visual way, even though cueing wise, there was going to be more formality about that. I see Erin popping on the video. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Erin.
we've got several questions going on in the chat about the whole, who got, because of archival and not letting it get out too far because of designers and stuff. So how you kept that maintained, double checking that you can, we've had clarification already in the chat that yes, you can assign a single document somebody can see, but they can't see the whole folder,
see the whole
and
thing,
vice versa. And then combined with all, I'm just going to combine these all into sort of one thing to discuss. Why were the videos on Dropbox, but you mentioned them in the Google?
So that's actually, if I remember correctly, it was a Flannery call. So we can talk to Flannery later about that. I have a feeling it has to do with how they play when you play them in preview is my guess.
And I would guess also storage.
Yeah, in my experience, they play better. So for security purposes, this is actually very common, the way that this is being shared on production contracts. And that for security purposes, it's usually housed somewhere and people are referring to it in preview. So they're not actually like downloading it, they're just previewing it. So those links would send you to a Dropbox file that you would watch it in the Dropbox program and the software and the way that it would open up. And we would keep the old, they're password protected in Dropbox. Thanks, Flannery. I was like, hey, look, Flannery's here. And we would keep the old video, which, everyone who was handling video, which really was just limited to stage management and to team choreo, the people actually handling the files, we were being very neurotic because our creative team might say, let's go back to what we did like 3 versions ago, and we have to be able to find it. So being a video librarian on shows that are really reliant on video, like you really need to assign 1 or 2 people to do that. You have to be safe about it because of the union rules, but you have to make sure that they are prepared with the right tools to carry that much, that file space on their computers, because there's, some barriers to entry with technological expectations. So as a stage manager who's leading the team, you should just be really clear about what those expectations are and make sure that your team members have the ability to hold on to files.
And I think I used the wrong term because archival is later. There's a different term for the designers being able to use.
These are reference videos.
That's the word. There you go.
So they're referencing these videos. And you would do that with fight choreo. You would do it with choreo. There's a lot of, I'm just going to say it right now because I'm sure people are private chatting about it. I would just say that like out on Facebook, there's a lot of information out there about various contracts. Sometimes people don't specify which contract they're talking about. They'll say, well, I had a rep tell me that musicians can't record their music in the rehearsal studio. And I had a rep tell me X, Y, and Z. Equity was well aware of everything that we were doing for reference. We were very explicit about what we were doing for reference. So it's, I just want to tell you all, this is not shocking to anyone, but out on social media, those are all super valid stories. And we should always just be clear about what agreement it was. And if we did talk to a rep, and I will tell you, I love our union, but sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is referencing or how they're actually interpreting agreement language. So that's a whole other workshop for another day, but I just want to say that it's not always you should never consider it written in stone when even a rep tells you that something is allowed or not allowed, because you might call that same rep 2 years later and they go, no, 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 and tell you the complete opposite thing. So sometimes it's circumstantial and sometimes it's just how people are interpreting agreement language. So on that note, I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Oh, I also wanted to say that in the room, I know Melissa's like, you're signing yourself up for all these additional workshops. So happy to do them. So happy to do them. So in the room, I had my iPad. So if we were like going to be restoring anything, I would use my iPad. My intent, sometimes I walked around with my computer because it was easier to edit on there. But sometimes I would use my iPad because my intent was that when we were in tech, I would have the deck sheet hard copy with me and I would have my iPad with me as well while I was on the floor, as it were. And I think, Noah, that was probably your plan as well.
Yes. And also, can I add one thing about the video
Yeah.
archival? Like the document that you shared, with it was just like that list of all the scenes and songs. That was that's what we shared with, you know, the designers and the brain and everyone. There was also like a huge archival Dropbox folder where like you said, we had everything. And the purpose of what we were showing in the brain is just the clearest version for every designer, so they know the absolute latest up-to-date thing, and they weren't seeing the entirety of the archival folders. So that's like another reason why we had two different locations for them.
Thank you for that. And not for nothing, a lot of our creative team changed. Like 50% of our creative team changed for various reasons when we moved from downtown to uptown. So there were people who were very committed to other Broadway shows that were teching while we were rehearsing. Like Natasha Katz was doing Diana. Luke Halls was doing the projections for West Side Story, and you know, became our projections designer and was really starting from scratch. And so truly, I think 50%, if not more, of our creative team was new when we went uptown. So it was really important that they had the ability to see what the hell we were doing. They did come into the rehearsal studio, obviously, and we saw them, but we felt good going into tech. We felt real good. And then we paused on our first day of tech. When we jump into the Google Slides, I'm going to bring them up because boy, this lead up is juicy. But I just also want to say, reiterate that part of why we chose Google Slides is because of the live updating. So they're currently in a state of us having been our first day on stage. It wasn't technically tech. There was some studio rehearsal that morning on Thursday, March 12th. And then we had a band seating and a sound check on stage. I say this because really we were all looking at our phones the whole time, but our sound designer was working his face off. The crew was working really hard to get us ready for what would be our official first day of tech on Friday the 13th. Is that right? I think that's right. Yeah, it was Friday the 13th. How cute. That's so cute. So let's take a look and then I will talk you all through some stuff here. And Noah, can you see that? I keep asking you because I can see you. Okay, great. So this is Sing Street Tracking Act 1. The reason that we have an Act 1 and an Act 2, because let's see how many slides are on here. There's 87 in Act 1, which includes some extra versions of blocking that we did or choreography that we did, that we would drop those slides down and not lose them entirely, but drop them down. So this sometimes, not very often, but sometimes these are so large and they have so many images in them that it would run slowly. Every once in a while on my computer, I don't know about yours, Noah, because I was using my old computer, but every once in a while. Yeah, so having Act 1 and Act 2.
Yeah.
What's that?
Every once in a while, it wouldn't load. You know, I don't know if that was New 42 Wi-Fi or. You know.
Well, it could be New 42 Wi-Fi, and all of our hearts would skip a beat, right? Because it's like, oh gosh, what happened to the brain, right? So because of that sort of anxiety that would flare up, we split it into 2 acts. And every day I would drop an egg, is what I would call it. I would download it from Google to my computer so that there was actually like not a hard copy, but like a digital file on my desktop so that if Google burned down, because look, friends, it's 2020, anything's possible. If Google like suddenly burned down, or if, you know, everything went to shit, we had backups every day, which was great. So looking at this again, we're going into tech. So we're letting it all hang out, I think is what we said before we started this call. Noah and I did not go back and clean any of this up. So you're welcome. We're all, here it is. So we're looking at, and I think you can still see my cursor, this is the ground plan for Sing Street and the Lyceum. The architecture of the Lyceum is evident in the proscenium down here and these thicker walls, and this is the audience down here. This ground plan is truly just a screenshot that I think I did it. I think I put it in the first slide. I think, was it me?
No, I did it.
Would you? Oh, look, I'm like, no, it was me. You're like, no, it most certainly was not. Did we take anything off of it, the ground plan, when we put it in?
If you look at where the jump platform is, I kind of like whited out where it was in the on the ground plan. It was like sitting at an angle, so I just like kind of whited it out.
I see, because you can see it a little bit there.
Yeah,
so I will just, go ahead, Noah, sorry.
No, you're good.
Oh, I was just going to say that whenever you're making minis, and I must have done it for my blocking pages. Whenever you're making minis, if you get a PDF of the ground plan and you're like, wow, there's all of this information that I don't need, or it shows a position for the drum platform, which is this gray shape upstage right, that you're like, that's actually not helpful in what we're doing. You, if you're me, you go into Microsoft Word and put like boxes, like white boxes that are filled in. Is that what you do, Noah?
Yeah, that's what I did. You can see like the corner of it peeking over into like the back black wall there. That's the corner of that white box, yeah.
And you can block out the stuff you don't want, and then you can take a screenshot of that. So that's really like all this is. Noah did it, not me, but that's all this was just like boop, laid in there. We eventually put a number line in, and I say eventually because we didn't start with one. So we had to go back and put a number line in. I don't even think we had numbers on the deck downtown. I think that was an uptown thing.
Yeah, no, we had them in rehearsal downtown, but not on the deck.
So we were like, yes, we will put numbers in because they will be on the deck on Broadway. We had entrances down stage right 1, 2, and 3, which is around this upstage wall here. So, and then we had downstage left 1, 2, and 3. As Noah showed us earlier, these are benches. They are on an angle. You're not losing your mind. That was a decision made by the sound department. So smarter people than I can explain that to you. These are our walls that had their hooks on them. These little rectangles back here that look like ladders, that's actually us displaying what the hooks are. So those aren't structural. That's actually just us putting a table in and saying where the guitars are. So the guitars have these different letters assigned to them, and those hooks that Noah was talking about downtown, they would be like R1, R2, R3, you know, so on and so forth. They had hooks that corresponded to them behind those bench positions. We made some hook decisions uptown that we don't need to belabor right now, but instead of, Noah's like, whoa, the trauma attached to that. So downtown, we just had a ton of hooks until we decided where we needed hooks, which wasn't that painful. But then when we went uptown, the scenic designer got smarter than us. And he was like, you know what? We're just going to tell you how many hooks you have on each side, and then you all can figure it out. And we did, and it was great. So that's what you're seeing there. There is space off stage over here. So when you see like these couches, because we have 4 couches in our show, when you see these couches over here, in theory, Rich, our local one props person who was in rehearsal with us, was so excited to park those couches back here. Like he had all sorts of plans that he'll do one day. This rectangle or square looking shape here is a tile floor. So that's not a platform. platform, really. It's just a tile floor here that goes into a different surface there. The walls are all totally gray. They're projection surfaces. So we were making big projection decisions going uptown. And so there is going to be a lot more visual content. There are also these sliding walls, and I'm just going to like say it before anyone sees it in the ground plan. And it's like, you didn't talk about the sliding walls at all. No, neither did anyone else. So these giant entrances, stage right 2 and stage left 2, actually have these walls that can close and open, but there's not enough crew on the show to be able to do it simultaneously. So everyone in rehearsal was like, you know what, we're just going to ignore it. And then when we get into tech, we'll see if we need to close them and open them. The reason I'm saying that to you is that I want anyone who's never worked on Broadway to know that even on the Broadway, there's still like huge scenic elements that people are like, we'll see if we need them in tech or not, that are indicative of having to have crew there and tracking crew through. And Noah and I were just like, cool. That's all good. Yeah, we'll figure it out. So you'll see these dots here are people. We are using character names, and part of the decision to do that is because whenever our understudy cast is looking at these character names, they can track them. We don't have any actors who play multiple roles, so it's really easy to say that these are the characters. We did notice when we went uptown that like BB is not what everyone referred to Barry as, right? There's no key that you see here because it's still working and not archival. But we had to make some decisions about what we were calling people. We also color coded them. So the family is in green, the band is in shades of blue. Brother Baxter is by himself in a colorless world. He's gray because he's the baddie, you know, in the show. So that's, I don't know that the colors ever helped me in any way, but it was a decision that we made. Maybe one day it'll be helpful. And I also just want to say that what's really important about these dots, so they're basically just shapes, and you can go up here. I'm so scared to do it, but you can insert a shape and you can insert a circle and you can fill it in. You can format it and fill it in with the color, and you could put a text box over it, right? So you could do a text box and put it over it. It's very similar to Word that way. But then when I'm going to do it, is this going to freak you all out? I'm going to do it. Oh man, I moved Robert. But when you move, Noah's like, how dare you? But when you move people, you would see that you would have to move the dot, and then you would have to move the text second. So you would move the dot and then the text, and nobody wants to do that. So one of our production assistants went in Photoshop and made us circles on transparent backgrounds that had the letters in them. And additionally, he made us props as well. So you see downstage, you know, off stage right 1, you can see there's a little piano with a bench attached. These Eamon 1, Eamon 3, and Gary 2 are our keyboards, and then our couches are PA made for us as well, so that we could insert those images into the Google Slides and then be able to move them around, because otherwise you're just gonna make yourself crazy. And I will say that because it's been a while since we looked at this, when Noah and I were looking at this to prepare for this moment in time, we saw a teal colored rectangle in Act 2, and we were like, what the hell is that? We had to ask, I asked Ilan, I don't know if I told you, I asked Ilan, I'm like, teal rectangle, like what the hell is that? He was like, it's a park bench. But because it wasn't used in the show, we had it off stage so we could account for its off stage parking. Because it wasn't used in the show, it like didn't have a label. It was sort of this idea that they're playing with that we like never really incorporated. And so our PA didn't make a little shape for the park bench. And now that it's been 3 months, we're like, what the hell was that shape? So learning curve, but like I said, we're letting it all hang out. We talked about the instruments. The smaller instruments are all tracked down here in the notes, which I'm going to let Noah talk about since he spent more time in the notes down below. And the drum kit we talked about, when you see something in a square off stage, like a letter, it's usually a letter in a square, that just means those guitar P and guitar V are off stage, and that they're not hanging on hooks on stage, because again, that's what these little little stalls are here is just representing the hooks on stage. We're very religious about tracking all of that, especially the instruments. And so, you know, we all got pretty obsessive over this thing we loved. Like once we got it set up in a way to work for us, we were very tender in the way that we cared for it, because at any point in time we had to reset and know where all the guitars went. In the rehearsal studio, we were able to touch things, but once we moved into the Lyceum, we weren't going to be able to touch things. We had to be able to communicate it really quickly about where things were tracking to our wonderful crew. Let me see if there's anything else I want to tell you about this. These little brown boxes here, these are television sets, and you can see that there's one still living downstage left, offstage left down here. Eventually we would letter those or number those, but that was a new idea. And so nobody really knew, like, we're going to see in tech if the TVs look different. I think we finally decided they were going to, but even on that first day on stage, we were working with our props department to figure out like how tall they even needed to be. So there was a lot of, because of the speed with which Sing Street was moving to Broadway, there was a lot of design and creative conversations that, you know, we had to be really loose about. So we eventually would letter those, but we had not done that yet. Let me see if there's anything else. So if you go through these slides, which this is really satisfying to be like, oh, look, people entered, right? So you can see that I'm about to point with my finger, ridiculous. You can see where people are waiting to enter. And then as you go through, you can see where they landed. And occasionally you'll be able to see that there's some path that's been drawn in an arrow here. And you can also note the orientation. You know, as we went, we'd always try and clean and catch because things would happen very fast. And so you have to find a rhythm. We had really 4 people in these, mostly, I think actually 3, me and Noah and Ilan were mostly moving stuff around, and here Ilan being our dance captain. And we would try and keep track of the orientation. So you can see downstage left, Amen 3, which is a keyboard, is upside down because we're trying to indicate what the orientation was. Let's see if there's anything else. This is the opening number. One of the things that we'll talk about disadvantages before we end, but one of the things is just we had not found, although I don't know that we worked that hard to find it, a way to title these in the same way that they were titled on the Indecent slides. And so I think that's one of those things that as we were in previews, we would go back and figure out how to do. But yeah, you can just see that things are moving. It looks very similar to Stage Right. But for reasons that we've already illustrated, we decided to use Google Slides instead. And this one's really nice because you can see the trajectory of where people are moving and striking their TV sets. Let me see if there's anything else. We definitely, as we experimented, like I said, we would, you know, have to very quickly take slides that we didn't want to lose and make sure we protected them somewhere and then put new slides in. With these slides, like with PowerPoint, you can, I'm not going to do it because that seems scary, but you can right click and copy and paste. And so it would pick up all the information that was in this slide, and then you could paste it and it would be there. But it doesn't have a tracking feature, which we're going to talk about later. The last thing I want to say before I hand it back over to you, Noah, is identifying beats in a show. Not only identifying like common vocabulary, but you also want to identify beats. Like, where are we always picking up from? What's a good section musically for us to pick up from? What's a good section staging wise for us to pick up from? Dramaturgically, what does the director need to see and understand, like where we're picking up from? Is there a transition where somebody has to take one guitar off and put another one on? You as a stage manager have to know, and I think every member of the stage management team has to know what those beats are, because they're like exits on a highway. And so that's really how we would make decisions about when we needed a new slide, what garnered a new slide. Again, sleek trucks for delivery. So we did have an organizing principle that we would try to not overslide. But if everybody moves and you want to see where they land, you know, like here, and then they land down stage, you want to be able to see that. And so skipping those moments are tricky. And we really would have, you know, the choreographer turn to us and go, wait a second, where is, you know, so-and-so in this moment? So yeah, I'm going to stop screen share so you can have it, Noah.
All right. I'm going to screen share, and I'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the bottom notes sections of these. Share. Okay. Can you see it? All right.
I can see it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to show you Dream for You, which is a song in Act 2. So here, this green square here is a phone booth, and you can see there's like a dark edge to it on 3 sides, and those are like the walls, and then the undark side, like the light side there, that's the opening of the phone booth. All right, and everything, yeah. So right now, like we can see this piano, which was off stage in the opener, is now on stage. The drum platform's moved a little bit over here. Oh, this is the blue little rectangle here. That's that's if we look at the slide before it. If you look at the slide before it, it's not there, and then it's there. So that just shows we're proving that this is a working document and it's not a finished product for archival purposes yet. So yes, in the bottom notes section here, we would have basically what we were calling this beat of the show, the scene of the show. So this is the end of the Rafina lyric/family scene. And over here, we would have, if there was like a couch on stage or the phone booth on stage, we would have if the brakes were locked and who was locking them. So phone booth locks when move is complete by Barry. So we know that the set piece there is locked when we're resetting and unlocked if it needs to be unlocked. Down here, we would have like, if I remember correctly, Amanda and Ilan were basically writing down quick like blocking notation summaries down here. And as you'll see later in the slides, once we started getting to choreography, Ilan was recording the choreography down here as well. Yes, so me personally, I was basically handling everything below that. So over here, I would have, if there was a prop move in the scene, I would notate them here. So like props, Brendan places mic stand downstage of Connor, Barry pulls back phone booth to position B on, yeah, of course. So over here, we see Brendan is a green dot over here, and we can see his pathway. Where he drops the mic stand, and then he would walk up to Connor and turn around and exit. So we have that visually, and have just like a little quick representation of that in the text down here in the notes. When instruments were moving, I would also record those. So over here up top, Ann enters with guitar N, Eamon enters with Eamon keys 1, Kevin shifts Eamon 3 downstage of drums. So we have here Kevin moving Eamon keys 3 downstage of the drums. Ann was entering, we have where she lands here with guitar N, that's that little square, and Eamon entering, landing, and also Darren here is entering and landing on the bench behind Sandra. And this was really helpful, again, because like having these pathways, it was with all the instruments in the way, we wanted to make sure we knew if they were crossing downstage of an instrument, upstage of an instrument, and the arrows were very helpful. But you'll see later on in the progression of the song that things move fast and furious here with the arrows. I would also record the spikes for the particular song or scene we were using. So in Dream for You, we're using teal spikes. So that would help. Like Rich, who was our prop guy in the room, he would know to look for the teal spikes if we were ever setting for Dream for You, because he would see that there. And then over here, I would be recording the props that were on stage. Over here, I have CO for Connor. He has like a little colon that indicates that Connor has a lyric book on him. I counted the phone booth, the piano, drum platform, and the Connor mic stand as a prop. And then I would have the props in the show where they were in their offstage position. So over here, offstage right 1, which was down here. I would have the boombox and the penny's purse and the sink, and these items were dead. And as we were progressing through and like things were settling in, if I knew a prop was dead, I would notate it. But that's, once we were starting to clean and run things, I was able to do that. Not so much when we were creating the scenes. So that's over here. And down here, I have the stage right benches and stage left benches. So at times, there were actors were leaving props behind the benches and baskets, or in certain cases underneath the benches where there were no speakers. So I would just have under like the stage left seat 5, there was a throw blanket underneath there, and in the stage left 1 basket, Penny had her wine glass and newspaper in there. So that's generally what was happening. Not happening in the visuals of the slides and what we're recording down here. And of course, like if we're just like resetting, we can just blow it up so we can see it more clearly and not be bogged down by the notes in the bottom. All right.
And going way back, just for reference, Google Slides, because you had mentioned really early that if you know PowerPoint, you can transfer it to Google Slides. So I'm assuming, because I haven't actually worked in Google Slides, I'm assuming it's like PowerPoint where you can say, hey, copy this slide. So all of this information, do all the notes transfer too?
Yep.
So
unfortunately, yes.
Good or bad, but you wouldn't have to rewrite every single prep either if it hasn't moved.
That's correct. Yeah, there's a file, and I believe it's is it here? Or make a copy, or where's
I usually right click it, but yeah.
Or right click it. Yeah. There's a duplicate slide function. A little out of practice here, forgetting exactly what.
I feel a little rusty too.
No. Yeah. All right.
And then just so it's on the recording, you were mentioning that one of the reasons you didn't group the text box with the circle was because when so many people were in it at once, then they could get untethered from each other and that kind of stuff. So doing it this way would make it so multiple people could be in the document at the same time.
Yeah, because one of the things I said in chat, I was answering a couple of questions in there, Noah, is it was about speed. Right, because we were trying to create as little homework for ourselves as possible. I think stage managers in general should make that as a goal for themselves. We weren't always successful. There were some days where we would have to, meet over lunch or come in, early as New 42 will let you come in. But we would have to come in early and, look at video to make sure that we caught something. There would be times where couches are spinning and phone booths are spinning, and we want to make sure that we have the trajectory right. Because again, there's a real allegiance to using this, that we all were very dedicated to making sure that it wasn't one of those things that sometimes stage management teams create, that it's actually not useful because it's not right, Anything else you want to add, Noah?
No, I mean, I'm going to flip through the slides so we can see how we broke up the song. And very quickly, I think we might be running a little behind.
No, we're okay, because we're going to talk about disadvantages and advantages.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just going to flip through here so we can get an idea of how we were tracking. So here we have first verse, like we were calling first verse A, first verse B, bridge, and you can see as I'm flipping through, you can kind of see how like they are shifting a little bit, and that just because we were moving so fast that we were trying to record as much as possible, and with the intention of going back and cleaning off of the videos that we were recording during rehearsal. So we're moving along. So we see arrows for movement here. I'll move along till we see a lot of movement here. As you can see, we're in second course A. Here we go. So this is where like things start getting a little crazy with the arrows. It starts to like earlier, I likened it to like a little league football play that's being drawn in the dirt. But in general, like if you were watching the video, like these arrows would mostly match up with the actors' movements, so we would just know their general path, know the general traffic patterns. Yeah, you can see how like they're moving, and then down here you can see that we're Ilan and Spooner were notating where they were facing on the kind of like the lyric of ooh, they have moment of resistance and stand on this second chorus, they move forward again. So and this was a working document, like we were moving very quickly, so we were just trying to notate as fast as possible for us to understand so that we would be able to show and communicate the ideas, again with the intention of going back. So like it wasn't perfect at all times, and we'll talk about some of the disadvantages. But this was like, how the general playbook of how we were recording and documenting the show. And like during a rehearsal day, you would see all the people up here in the top corner, and you would see everyone be on the same slide. And like I would be moving instruments around, Spooner would be moving people around, Ilan would be drawing arrows, and then we'd all be typing furiously in the bottom notes section. It was actually kind of like beautiful to watch it like come together so quickly. It was really cool to watch. And then they'll be like, no, we don't like that. Let's throw it out. And we go, okay. And we go back to the slide and start it all. Let's go back to the first slide of the song and start it all over. But it was a blast. I thought it worked really well for us. It really forced us to all be on the same page because we're all writing the notes in the same section, forced us to all use the same language, the same vernacular. So we all knew what we were talking about. We all were using the same vocabulary. And it was immensely helpful. And I thought we moved a lot quicker and more efficient than we did downtown.
Yeah, and you get a kind of high from having something that's like serving you so well. Like it takes some time to set it up, to find your rhythm, but you know, Ilan would mostly sit with us, which by the way, Ilan and Flannery, you should turn your video on because this is the part where you're going to join us. But they, you know, Ilan would sit with us, for example, and there would be something that that the director would change, and I'd be like, I got it, because we all knew, like we knew what that meant, what the implications were of like moving someone somewhere. So I'd be like, I got it. And it's like watching people play softball or baseball in the outfield and say, it's fine, I got it. Because that's, you know, we just had a rhythm in that way, which was really great.
Yeah, and sometimes we would make little text box with notes on the side, being like, I have no idea what just happened. Please help me. like in bold red, like font, like Ilan, help.
Ilan, help us. And we would put like, and remember those I would put like a red text box across the whole thing and be like, this is wrong. Like if it was just like happening so fast, and like we had because once we were uptown and rehearsing in New 42, we would have multiple studios going on. And so the stage management team would get broken up. And so there would just be days where we would say like from in big red bold letters, like this needs to be fixed. Ruth wants to know if we use this method from the beginning of the process, and we did. So earlier when we were talking about, and I don't know if you heard Ruth or not, but just for everyone, when we transitioned from downtown to uptown, we had the conversation about using Google Slides and how to make sleek methods of delivery for information. So we did use this the whole time that we were uptown, but our rhythm probably didn't set in until like week 2. So the deck sheet is a separate document because that's cues. So the deck sheet has, and I'm answering questions from the chat, which I'll read out loud. So was the goal to create the deck sheet from this document or add it to this? When we were in the brain, you could see that there's a Google sheet that's the deck sheet. Which is cues, right? It's cue-based stuff. So the idea is that all of us, the crew, me, Noah, would have whatever visual thing we were using. In my case would be an iPad, and then I would also have the deck sheet. The deck sheet I would refer to when we were in a moment where we were coming up on a cue. But frankly, because of the amount of time that goes into building this, not really time setting it up, but the dedication of using it, you know the show in a way. It's like in your bones, which we're going to talk about a little bit. So I want to introduce Flannery Gregg, who's our associate choreographer. Hello, Flannery. And Ilan Eskenazi, who is our understudy the whole time through. We had him from August downtown, uptown. He's the understudy for 2 characters, but also our dance captain. So hi, friends. Welcome, welcome. We thought, hi. We thought it was really important that we had the 4 of us talking to you about the advantages and disadvantages, and we'll answer as many questions as we can before we run out of time, because all 4 of us were really flying in formation, as I said in the chat. So I think first we should focus on disadvantages, and I know there's some things that Flannery, you might add about translating this to stage right and stuff. But do either one of you want to start with what some of the disadvantages are of using Google Slides in the way that we are?
I mean, I was just reminded, first of all, it's so good to see the park bench again. But it sort of reminded me, like, because we were using it from the beginning, where creative decisions are still being made, and we were, correct me if I'm wrong, but often we were making new slides based on the slide that came before it. So positions of things would be where they just were, but if something was changed from farther back in the show, then you have to go back through all of the slides that are in that span of time and make sure that the positions are accurate. Otherwise, I remember we used to see, pieces be in one place and on the next slide another, but then be back where they were, you know what I mean? So I think that came back to me as we were looking back over it.
Flannery, anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there aren't too many disadvantages on my end. I was always so grateful, and I can speak for like all of Team Choreo, that stage management would always know the most up-to-date versions of scenes and songs because of the slides. Because on Team Choreo's side, we were constantly taking video, constantly like double checking movements and choreography. And so to be able to go to Team SM and really see like, sorry, we did so much yesterday. What is the latest situation? And then to be able to work off that was just huge, a huge advantage for us. And also going off of kind of what Noah said earlier, I feel like this extreme tracking that we did every day in the Google Slides, that we could all access live and be saved live always, helped Team Choreo and the show keep the intentionality of each move, because when you have actors moving props, moving sets, and the choreography like involves like very like efficient task-based needs, I think it's really important that they don't just seem like tasks, but they seem like storytelling. And I feel like Noah and Spooner and Molly were always like so helpful in making me understand like, wait, that's like Gary's keys, and we can't just have like someone else toss in Gary's keys. And so we all kind of kept each other on track with that. And I was so grateful from a storytelling perspective to have that like creative logistical brain always working underneath this machine. And then, yeah, translating it to stage right. To be honest, I'm not a stage right fan. I'm very, I know, like, big deal here. Like, I remember I worked on The Great Comet, and we did like tiny stickers with actors' initials, and we were doing like the written version of stage right. So then when stage right came about, I was excited, but then when I started using it for Sing Street, it definitely seemed kind of complicated and maybe not quite as user-friendly as the Google Slides. But if we were to translate it into stage right, I was just thinking it'd be a great place to cross-check what we already have. It'd be a great place to add to the number of slides so that when we think about the maintenance of the show and the preservation of the show, that we could really easily see, okay, so Connor goes from here to there during this verse, but then on the next 8 count, he exits, takes off his shirt, comes back around, grabs a guitar, and we could see individual tracks more. Because if you see, we saw some of those Google Slides with like a bunch of arrows, which I think are great and crucial. But then to break those down more when you're teaching swings, I think specifically, would be crucial for me going into brush up rehearsals and stuff. But Google Slides, like for me, that pre-pro that we had, Team SM, where it was just Team SM and Team Choreo hanging out, was thrilling. And I feel like our show was going through such a fast growth spurt that it became so clear to me that Team SM and Team Choreo, we were like getting married in that moment. Like I really realized that I could not kind of creatively, logistically think about this show without all of our minds thinking ahead, thinking about where this guitar needs to go in 2 songs, or thinking behind, like we got a note from like the producers that we need to change the number of TVs. So it's like, yeah, I'm really grateful for Google Slides. I'm a big fan, and I'm here with huge gratitude for stage managers in general. Like your attention to detail and is just like above and beyond, and choreography would just like fall flat without like the intention and the like clarity of these slides and this like deep tracking. So thank you, Team SM.
Thank you, Flannery, and thank you, Ilan. I definitely, and Noah, I know we have about 14 minutes left, but I just want to say that, like, you know, one of the disadvantages is that you have to have the technology and the tools to use it. But you are on a Zoom call right now listening to us, so one would assume that you have the ability to have access to Google Slides. And so I encourage you, we're not spending a lot of time, we're talking about like our application of it, and we're not spending a lot of time saying like, this is how you put a box in, because the assumption is that you can go and you can play around with that. And even if you're not an expert at PowerPoint, it's pretty easy to navigate. And if you have any trouble with that, you know where to find me. So let me know. And the other thing is, in chat, you know, we had a question, I think it was Katie who asked it, about scale. So the number line helps us with scale. It helped us scale, you know, some of our furniture and our people to the space that we thought they would, you know, take up. But in the drum platform too, like is to scale. But it's not, its speed was the bigger commitment other than scale. Are there any other disadvantages, Noah, that you want to add before we talk about advantages and then take one or two questions? Because we've answered a lot of them already. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I feel like Ilan touched on it, but the duplicating of the slides is like the biggest blessing, the biggest curse sometimes, because it would be like, okay, like in the note section that I had below, like it would be like, okay, this wine glass is under the stage left bench for the whole show, or for like most of Act 1, and it gets taken out and used at like the second to last scene. And then we would come in the next day, and then we get the note, okay, Penny's gonna be over here now, so the wine glass needs to be on the upstage, upstage left, so like seat 9. And I'd be like, because then I have to go back through every individual slide and like copy paste like the new location. So that was that was a disadvantage, I would say. And then like if you don't catch a mistake and that slide gets duplicated 30 times, and then eventually when you're cleaning, you go back and you realize like, oh man, I got a lot of cleaning to do. But yeah, that's I feel that was the one disadvantage for me.
I mean, there definitely is music rehearsal time on the show too, which lends
Yeah.
itself to cleaning. It's because New 42 doesn't let you be there most of the time before 9 a.m. and because it won't let you stay there most of the time past 7 p.m. Like, it's actually really lends itself to stage managers, if they can. I saw Chris in there say on Jagged Little Pill that was not possible, but if they can, it helps you sort of structure your day in that way, that you start using your time in different ways. And especially with a giant stage management team like we had. I want to talk about some of the advantages. The only thing I'll add, and we'll try and save about 5 minutes to answer some of the questions that we might not have gotten to yet, but I will say the big advantage was flying in formation, because when we go into tech, this is like the most beautiful illustration of it I think I can give you. Nothing better than watching everyone fly in formation in the document. Like if you're in there and it is like high noon in the rehearsal studio, you can see me, and maybe Flannery's in there too, and Ilan and Noah, like moving all this stuff around, and it's so beautiful. And especially when we got to the point where we'd be like, I got it, yep, I got it, oh, I know what that means, okay, I got it. And we could play as a team. But when we were going into tech, team dance captain was going to have his own table. Now he has another job being an understudy for 2 roles in the show, so that's a lot. But because Ilan's been with us for a really long time, there's not really the same learning curve for maybe some of the other wonderful understudies that we have on the show, right? So and Ilan did go on downtown, and it was wonderful. And so it's maybe in Ilan's bones in a different way. I'm totally speaking for you, Ilan, while you're here. But he would have his own table. So the hope and dream was that when we were on deck, that Ilan in the house would be able to be doing updates. So again, we're not creating homework for us. But, and Ilan, do you want to add some advantages about, I mean, you talked about it a little bit, but.
I mean, I was very, I recall doing a lot of drawing, and I think that like, I was just thinking that it can be seen as a disadvantage when you have those transitions or scenes where we have like all 10 people doing this, you know what I mean? But that's where the color, I used to joke with you guys that I was like creating like Van Goghs on these slides, but like that's where the color comes in really nicely, because you match up the lines with the characters and suddenly it makes total sense. And it was super clear once you made sure to take the time to make everything color coded. And to me, like, that's so easy to see, and helped me when I was trying to help Flannery too.
Oh yeah, I could really easily see everyone's pathway, and then if there was like traffic of any kind, and actually drawing out the moves after you make something as a choreographer helps you kind of see what you should change about it immediately to make it better. So like super crucial. And I did pull out this because I was really excited to use it when we were getting to tech, but we didn't get to use it yet. And I was gonna like walk around the stage and try to draw changes and then take pictures of this and like send it to Ilan and be like, you can update the Google slide with this. That was like our hope and dream. And one day we'll do it, but yeah.
Thanks, Flannery. Sam asked, oh, you asked it privately and I outed you, Sam, sorry, but if we were using Final Draft, and we were not using Final Draft on this show. We were using good old Microsoft Word for the script and for some of the pictures we took. Before we take any more questions, Noah, do you want to add anything about the advantages that we maybe haven't covered already?
I feel like we touched on it a little bit, but the advantage of like having the slides with the notes in the bottom and like the chart, like the pictures and the arrows and where everything needed to be was just like so valuable. Because if I needed to handle something, or if I needed to call a designer and we needed to reset, I could like be like, hey, TJ, Kate, open up your laptop, go to slide 24 in Act 2, and can you guys help set? Or like Rich, who was in the room with us, I'd be like, hey, Rich, we're setting for slide 36, and he'd be like, got it, and he'd just do it. It was so easy. It made running the room just like so much easier and a breeze, especially when you're dealing with so many other things. You're answering emails and you don't have necessarily like the time to double check things. Like they had the slide, the information was there, and like it would happen.
And I said this earlier, but in case anyone joined us later, I mean, because we're on this great pause and we haven't looked at it, well, great is relative, this pause, but we haven't looked at it in 3 months. I would often in the shower try and be like, okay, what did we do in our last draft of Sing Street, to try and remember? But when we were preparing for this and looking through our slides and talking about what we wanted to cover, I was like, oh, funny, now I actually I'm back in the game. Like we have some cleaning to do for archival purposes. But again, we had to favor speed at all times. So we have a few minutes left. I'll just take questions out of the chat, right, Erin? Is that okay?
Yeah. I have one from way back.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you said you would download part of the brain each night, your eggs or whatever, would you do the whole brain or just like the things that had changed?
So we had an active Google Slide file that was Act 1 and an active Google Slide file that was Act 2. And I would download Act 1 and I would download Act 2. And Jason Kaiser earlier asked in the chat if we, when things were changing, like I was talking about paper notes earlier, that I would have like 4 blocking sheets on top of each other and they would be dated and I would be able to understand like what those different versions were downtown. With this, if we're so flying in formation that we would know if they were going rogue, and we would also know if, and by they I mean the choreographer and the director, we would also know if it was just like them seeing. We're just gonna see. Everybody relax. We're just gonna see, and we're like, we know what that means. So we would go way down. We might like copy slide 14 where we are in the show, and then like go way down to the bottom of the slides, and we would date it so we knew what it was, and we would use language that was respectful but would let us know that this is just like trying stuff, right? And so we would like bury it way down, or we would do the opposite. We would take the old stuff and move it and then put it up there, put the new slides in there if it seemed a little more committed. So we had a question in there from Ben Walsh, says, what level of blocking notes were being taken by Maddie and Amanda on paper and scripts, given that slides contained a lot of that info? Maddie was still taking traditional blocking, and he's one of the best stage managers on the face of the planet. And he, like, in those notes, it was similar to the blocking I was taking downtown, right? Like he would know what the intention was and where people were going and like big gestures, but Maddie didn't get himself involved in like guitar B, you know what I mean? Like he would know, because he's so good at his job, he would know that like, oh, B is, stage right now because Gion's about to play it, because he's just that in tune with what's going on. But like he didn't bother himself with the heavy duty tracking of that level. So he was taking what I would call traditional blocking notes. Is there a way to lock in a photo like the ground plan so that when you duplicate it, that particular item is always locked in? Probably. I mean, we never did that. And occasionally we would pick up the ground plan. It was usually Ilan, I think, would pick up the ground plan. And we all had habits. We would do shit and they'd be like spoons. And I'm like, fiddlesticks, because I'd realize what I'd done. And so we all had things we did. But I remember I would know that because it would be live on my computer. So I would see the ground plan shift. And because the number line was in there, we would know where it was supposed to be. And you would hear Ilan go, it was was like, dude, it's cool. So there probably is a way to do it. We don't, pretend to be experts about it. So if anyone finds a way, let us know. But we had not found that. Whitney said, was there a lot of pre-pro work done to create the symbols for characters and props? Were those stored in a master doc, and what made it easy to access them? We had a PA make those in Photoshop, put them in a folder. I think whenever something new would get added to the show, he'd do it. Like, it was pretty like, boop, and he would just do it. It was nice to have a PA who was that nimble with Photoshop. So the dots, like, I made a request one day toward the end of the day, and I was like, can you, before like we have staging tomorrow, which was halfway through the day, can you do this? And he made all the dots, and he knew exactly what I wanted. His name is TJ Lyons. He's an excellent production assistant. If anyone's hiring, he's free for a few months. Let's see. Did you have any major disasters with the Google Slides during the process? No. I mean, I say that now, our process isn't over. We haven't teched yet with them, so we'll see, but we didn't have any major disasters with them. What did the decision process look like for adjusting the way things were done in the document? I guess I don't really understand that question. What did the decision process look like for adjusting the way things were done? I'm not really sure about that question. We spent a lot of time together. Noah, do you understand that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, like, we had frequent like meetings over like Schnippers and Dig In and stuff where we would like debrief like what just happened during the morning, and so we were made sure that we were all on the same page, and have the meal and be like, okay, so like going forward, let's call this move this wavy arm thing, or like, I don't know, just to try and keep language the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sounds like you also had your own, like, one of you was more so dealing with the guitars, or you had your wheelhouses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We had our wheelhouses. I moved a lot of people around. I really liked moving the dots around. Always such fun. Noah's like, oh God, the dots. But yeah, I really like moving the dots around. Noah spent more time in the notes, although Ilan and I would take blocking notes in there.
In the choreo notes and stuff.
Yeah.
And so by that point, Amanda, did you give up on the script at that point, and you were mainly doing blocking in there?
I didn't open my script anymore at all. I was like, forget it. I started with, it's a good question. I started with hard copy blocking because I was in a transitional period, right? It's like the second Broadway show that I've done in that fashion where I'm like, okay, I'm doing like a different job. So thank God Noah's Noah. But it was, it was very like transitional for me. And I sat down with my binder and then I was like, forget this. But part of that was falling in love with the Google Slides, so, and I didn't even, when we evacuated the Lyceum, I didn't even take my script with me. That's how married I was to it. I'm pretty sure it's just sitting in the stage management office in the Lyceum, because it's, it's about being nimble at that point. And we had access to a PDF of the most up-to-date script because Molly was a rock star in making sure that it was always up to date. So we were able to get into the script. I think that's all of the questions.
Yeah, that's all I'm seeing.
Yeah. So right on time. Wow. Flannery, Ilan, thank you so much for hanging out with us for our whole session. But it's really, really nice to have both of you here. And I just want to further illustrate that the brain, this foursome here, is going to get back in there and tech this show and is super prepared to do it. And I'm so grateful for everything. And Noah, Silva, you are just the best. And I adore you. And thank you so much for all the things that you shared with all of us about making Google Slides and putting up with me moving dots around. I don't know if I moved Robert back to his position, so I'll look.
We'll watch the video and look maybe. No, but thank you so much. This was like this system changed my life. Like it made working like so much fun, and like it gamified it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And Erin Joy. Oh yeah, you're like woo. Oh, Erin, thank you so much for having us here. It was fun.
Yes, I have to unmute myself. There we go. So yeah, just one more time, if you didn't get the names, because they're underneath their names, underneath their photos all the time, but these are all the folks that you had. This is a great time that both Stage Managers Association and you're the Stage Manager 2021. And so you can look, we both have Facebook pages and groups and the stagemanagers.org website. At some point, if you're not an SMA person, at some point this will be available on our constantly rotating public access page. However, this weekend we're undergoing a major website change. So don't freak out when you go this weekend to look at the website, because it'll be even better when you come back next week. And you can find Amanda and I certainly all over the interwebs. Thank you so much. This is great.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, friends.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. And yeah,
Thank you all.
go watch Newsies. Is it Newsies? Nate said in the chat that it's pro-union movie night, and I think the first movie is Newsies, which I've never seen. So I know. Look at all those faces. I'm gonna go. Bye.
It was like when I made the Harry Potter reference the last one, you were like, what?
I was like, Harry, who? What now? Yeah, I don't know what rock I've been living under, but there you go. I've been living under a Google slide rock. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end it now.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys.